Om Sarvadharma Sthapakastvam Sarvadharma Swarupakaha Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. We are studying Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, second part, as the spiritual aspirant or struggler or sadhak. And we are in the 8th chapter and we read the 26th para last time. And the question is that Sri Ramakrishna's strange experiences, because of their strangeness, some people have a doubt. And Saradananda Swamiji is telling that these experiences can be divided into two parts. Though the word she has not used here, I am telling, Swasamvedya and Parasamvedya. Something which he sees inside may not be seen by people outside. But certain things are there which he sees inside and people see them outside. So from them, we can make an anuman that all his experiences are spiritually truth, physically facts, so there is no subjectivity in them. His experiences belong to a level which is from the universal mind, and so in the outside world it must reflect itself. So this he has told, and he said that we have several examples like that we have been telling. But here, for the satisfaction of the reader, we will tell one more. And that is, we come to para 27. An example, the description of the master's vision at the time of the worship of Durga at Suresh Chandra Mitra's house in 1885. If you remember, we read this while describing Divya Bhava and Narendranath. But this is the proper place where it has been described to show the objectivity. So let us read it. It was the end of 1885 when the people of Calcutta, men, women and children, were all filled with joy and enthusiasm as usual on the occasion of the great autumn worship and festival. Bengalis know this very well, and non-Bengalis should live in Bengal at the time of Sarda Puja to understand this. I experienced this. Everybody simply forgets everything and thinks of Durga Puja, mother is come, mother will come. I remember that from one place, Shillong, I was to go to some other place. Then the devotee said, you are going away. No, Puja is coming, you are going away. So, like that, the Saradananda Swami has described, men, women and children were all filled with joy and enthusiasm as usual, joy and enthusiasm for activity. On the occasion of the great autumn worship and festival, Durga Puja is done in Ashwin Mas. So it is autumn. And it is not only worship, but all sorts of celebrations go on that time. So, although the current of that bliss was being particularly felt in the hearts of the Master's devotees, because Master was with them, there is a great obstacle standing in the way of its manifestation. Inside their feeling of, for he, in whose company they felt the surge of delight, was seriously ill. The Master was suffering from cancer of the throat. And at that time, whatever his experiences, they are also coming out real. So whether the body is in any condition, so that is the beauty. The devotees had hired a two-storied house at Shampukur in Calcutta and had brought the Master there about a month previously. Mahendralal Sarkar, the well-known doctor, homeopathic doctor, prescribed medicine and diet and was doing his best to cure the Master. But the disease had shown no sign of abatement so far. On the contrary, it was worsening by degrees. So physical condition is like this. The householder devotees would come to that house morning and evening and supervise and make all necessary arrangements. Many of the young student devotees were engaged in the service of the Master. So they were students in schools and colleges and devotees of the Master. Oh, student, I doubted, so I looked. Yuvak, Yuvak Chhatra. Okay. Yuvak Chhatra. So, young student devotees. Many of the young student devotees, correct, were engaged in the service of the Master at all times, except when they went to have their meals. Some again would, whenever necessary, spend all the 24 hours there without going home even for their meals. When they went to have their meals in their houses, that is the meaning. And some people did not go to the houses at all. If the Master spoke much or went into ecstasy again and again, the blood in his body would flow upward and constantly irritate the sore, which prevented the cure. Therefore, the doctor advised the Master to check both the acts. The Master too was trying to follow the prescription, but was in spite of himself reverting to them again and again. For, unlike ordinary men, he failed to regard as precious the body which he looked upon with contempt all his life as a trifling cage of flesh and bone. All his life he has looked upon the body as a cage of flesh and bone, not something pleasant and to be cared for, from which he had withdrawn his mind completely. As soon as the topic on God was raised, he wanted to follow the doctors, but he could not follow these 2 points. As soon as the topic on God was raised, he would forget all about his body and everything about maintaining it and joining the discussion of the topic almost with the same enthusiasm as before. Almost, he is telling, would repeatedly go into ecstasy. There were many souls who came, this is the first point, second point. There were many souls who came thirsting for spirituality. Unable to remain indifferent to the eagerness of their hearts, the Master taught them sadhana in a low voice. So he is trying to follow the doctor, low voice, but he is telling them. Seeing his joy and enthusiasm in the work of ministration, to which he applied himself untiringly, Many of the devotees thought that the master's disease was simple and could be easily cured because he is not taking care of that and become free from anxiety. Some again opined a strange comprehension of spiritual matters. The master had this parenthetical clause, strange comprehension of spiritual matters. That means they did not have proper comprehension of spiritual matters, and so their opinion was like that. That the master had purposely assumed this physical disease for bestowing his grace on the new devotees and imparting religion to many. That's why he has come to Calcutta. People know he is ill, so more people will come and he'll teach them. A little different in Bengali, please. কেউ কেউ আবার নবাগত ব্যক্তি সকলে কৃপা করিবার ঠাকুর শারীরিক ব্যাধির উপায় কিছু কাল এইরূপ মত প্রকাশ পূর্বক সকলকে নিঃশব্দ করিতে চেষ্টা পাইয়াছিলেন। Little different, huh? This clause, strange comprehension of spiritual matters, is not there, but they wanted to convince others of their opinion. That is the clause. Nishabda koriya chesta korichile. They could not listen to what others are telling. They made them quiet and forcefully put on their opinion. That is the point. The doctor was visiting him almost every day in the morning or in the afternoon. While he was examining the patient, writing the prescription, and advising the antecedents, he would be so absorbed in listening to the master's conversation on God that he could not take his leave even after the lapse of 2 or 3 hours. Doctor forgot everything. Again, putting question after question and listening for a long time to the wonderful solutions of these, the doctor himself. He would sometimes say regretfully, so you see, doctor also is forgetting and then regretting. I made you talk much. It has been unwise. But don't talk with anybody for the rest of the day. And then it won't do you any harm. So, he does not expect that others will be having spiritual anchoring. Don't you say your words have such attraction that whenever I come to you, I can't leave this place for 2 or 3 hours and I have to neglect my profession. I don't even know how time flies. Anyway, don't talk so long with anyone else. Partly as a joke and partly with love and joy, he said, talk thus with me only when I come. That will not do any harm. At this, the doctor and all others would laugh. That they know this is not true, but it is a manifestation of his love. Surendra Mitra, so the whole condition is being described. Surendranath Mitra, whom the master sometimes called Suresh Mitra, Ish Indra, was celebrating the Durga Puja that year in his residence at Shimla. Shimulia, Calcutta, not Shimla, not Himachal Pradesh, Shimla. Formerly, his family used to celebrate it every year, but then there had once been a mishap and the worship had been discontinued since then. No one of the household was bold enough to perform it after that. And if anyone tried to celebrate it, all others dissuaded him vehemently. However, strengthened by his faith in the power of the master, Surendranath was absolutely free from fear of any mishap due to the interference of demigods, etc. They cannot have power over master, he is God. And did not care at all for anybody's objection or obstruction when he had once resolved to accomplish anything. So, because of that is the faith in the master. Therefore, although all the members of the household raised objections, They could not make him refrain from carrying out his resolve that year. He got the master's approval and brought the mother of the universe to his house and bore all the expenses himself to the exclusion of other members of the joint family. The only element of sadness in Surendra's joy was that the master would not be able to join the celebrations on account of his illness. Again, as a few relatives fell seriously ill, so some signs opposite came. A few days before the commencement of the worship, he was held responsible for all that and incurred the displeasure of all the household. But unperturbed even on that account, Surendra devoutly began the worship of the Divine Mother with great care and attention and invited all his fellow disciples. So, how much faith he has? Though something bad has happened, he has not given up. He knows God will do everything well. The worship pertaining to the seventh day of the lunar month had been finished the day before. This non-Bengali should understand. Because Navaratra in all other parts of India is for 9 days, starting from Pratipada. But in Bengal, the image is brought. And on Shashti, the Bodhan is done. And on Saptami, Ashtami and Navami, worship is done. Vijayadashmi some worship and then Visarjan. So they say Durga Puja is for 3 days, Saptami, Ashtami and Navami. That everybody should understand. The worship pertaining to the seventh day of the lunar month had been finished the day before. Lunar month, Saptami Tithi. Because Bengal is observed month, many parts of India observe lunar months, many parts observe solar months. But the religious things are all done according to lunar count. Because moon is the lord of the mind. So all spiritual things are governed by the moon. So when the moon is at a particular position, then that thing should be done. You understand? In Bengal, they call it Tithi Puja. Tithi. So Tithi is the appearance of the moon. And that governs our mind. And sun governs our physical activities. Seasons are according to sun. But the religious festivals, except one festival of the Hindus, and that is Makar Sankranti or Pongal, and various names it is called, because it is a harvesting festival. So harvest goes according to the sun, and so that is the festival. All other religious festivals, the very names, Rama Navami, Krishna Ashtami, so we understand that. And so this description is there that the seventh day of the lunar month had been finished the day before. It was the auspicious eighth day. So Ashtami Puja is the main puja. That is the most auspicious day. It is called Mahashtami. Many devotees gathered together at the temporary residence of the master at Shampukur and were enjoying in his company the bliss and the talks and songs about the divine. So this was going on. Talks, songs. Narendranath began singing devotional songs immediately after the doctor's arrival at 4 in the afternoon. All were charmed by those exceedingly melodious vibrations of tunes coupled with remarkable spiritual fervor and lost themselves completely in them. So Narendra also has been changed. And doctor wanted that when he comes, Naren should sing. So as soon as the doctor came, Naren started singing. The master was sometimes having ecstasy, at the end of which he was explaining briefly in a low voice the import of the song to the doctor. Because these are many couched in a spiritual, tantric, technical language. So the import is something to be explained to one non-habituated with that. Who sat beside him. Some of the devotees lost consciousness in deep spiritual feelings. So the whole atmosphere is that puja. Swamiji singing and Thakur's presence. There flowed in the room a strong current of bliss, which was almost palpable. That means we could feel it. Time passed unbeknown to all, and it was 7:30 p.m. Remember, Naren's stamina of singing, carried away by the devotion. The doctor was startled at last. He embraced the Swami with paternal affection, that means like his own son, took leave of the master and stood up. When the master also rose from his seat, smiling, so as if to say farewell to the doctor, master also stood up and entered immediately into deep samadhi, because this is another thing, because Ashtami and then Navami, Sandhi Puja, so Thakur without knowing that has gone into samadhi. The devotees began whispering, is it not the time for the Sandhi Puja? Sandhi is the juncture between Ashtami and Navami. It is not at a particular fixed time of the day, sometimes midnight, sometimes afternoon, like that. That is why the master has entered into samadhi. Is it a matter of little surprise that he has entered suddenly into it without knowing the time? He did not know. Now it is Sandhi and all that. But he stood up to pay farewell to the doctor, and because of that Sandhi, he entered into samadhi. About half an hour after that, the master's samadhi came to an end and the doctor bade good night. So doctor also stood there. 7:30 have gone, so doctor stood up. Master stood up, went into samadhi. So doctor also waited. The master now said to the devotees about his samadhi. I saw that there opened a luminous path from here to Surendra's house. He is seeing in the samadhi, superconscious state. I saw further that attracted by Surendra's devotion, the mother had appeared in the image. So because of his devotion, mother has manifested in the image, and that a ray of light was coming out from her third eye. So Devi in her full form, the third eye, and from there a light is coming. I also saw this, he is seeing lying on the sick bed and standing up in Shampukur. Surendra was in Shimilia. I also saw that rows of lamps were lighted in the front veranda, and Surendra was sitting weeping piteously in the courtyard in front of the mother. Go you all together to his house now. He will feel much comforted to see you. She was weeping for darshan of the mother, and I was weeping because master could not come there, and he had invited all the devotees. So when the devotees come, at least he will feel better. All including Swami Vivekananda. Why Swami Vivekananda is mentioned? Because most rational of them all, who could see the tallying between master's samadhi vision and actual facts. All including Swami Vivekananda then saluted the master and went to Surendra's place. They questioned him and came to know that rows of lamps were actually lighted in that veranda. And unable to check his surge of feeling, Surendra sat in the courtyard before the image and wept loudly like a boy crying, Mother, Mother, for about an hour at the time of the Master's Samadhi. Master's Samadhi was half an hour, Surendra cried for 1 hour, but that time is telling. For about an hour, finding the vision during the Master's Samadhi correspond to the external events in detail, the devotees felt that there was no end to their joy and amazement. Joy because they could see that Thakur is God. They could see that the spiritual visions are not subjective, they are tallied outside. And amazement, because it was a new thing for them. So, this is the one incident mentioned to say, in general, that Thakur's visions or experiences are not subjective, not a result of the derangement of the brain, not due to some disease, but they are physically verifiable facts experienced in the spiritual height. How Rani Rasmani and Mathur examined the master owing to their mistaken notion. So the context is that when he met the Rani, the doubt had entered Rani and Mathur, and they put Ganga Prasad Sen, the physician, at that time. And that is now, in reference to that, this event which was much later has been described. So we go back there now. What happened to Rani and Mathur Babu? At one time during the first 4 years of his sadhana, Rani Rasmani and Mathur Babu, her son-in-law, thought that the derangement of the master's brain produced by unbroken continence. So that is one thought. That is one thought in the world, that if you have unbroken continence, it will affect your brain. Swami Vivekananda, he had some problem with the nerves because of his strain. And in France, or some French lady doctor is telling, and used to joke on that. Madame said, you should be moderate in continence. Produced by unbroken continence was manifesting itself as spiritual restlessness. So reverse. Spiritual restlessness was manifesting in symptoms of physical. But they think physical symptoms are due to unbroken continence, and that is appearing as spiritual. That is the understanding of the worldly people, though they had some appreciation. Considering, so out of love for him, kindness for him, considering that he might regain his health if his continence was broken, and desirous to do good to the master thereby, they tried to tempt him through Lakshmi Bai and some other beautiful harlots, prostitutes, with their amorous gestures. First in Dakshineshwar and afterwards in a house at Mechua Bazar in Calcutta. Mechua Bazar famous for prostitutes. First bringing one prostitute in Thakur's room, and second time taking Thakur's there without telling him. The master used to say that he saw the divine mother in those women. So whether they are prostitutes or not his consideration. All women are nothing but manifestations of the divine mother. And repeating mother a few times, lost consciousness of external world in front of the prostitutes and entered completely, and that his sense organ became contracted and entered completely into his body like the limbs of a tortoise. So scriptures, Gita, Kurmongani was Sarvasha. Yada Indriyani Samarate Kurmongani was Sarvasha. That is the description in the Gita, and in Thakur that is happening physically. Thinking that they had committed a great, so effect on the prostitutes, thinking that they had committed a great sin by trying to tempt him to break his continence. They begged his pardon with tears in their eyes, saluted him again and again, and bade goodbye with apprehensive minds. So, apprehensive means something wrong should not fall them. They have done something very wrong. So they, on Mathur and Rani sharing, they came to tempt him to break his continence. And because his organ receded inside and he was telling mother, mother, they were filled with an opposite idea and felt ashamed due to their previous ideas and apprehensive that something wrong should not happen to them. They saluted him again and again and went away. In this way, we are finishing the 8th chapter. Let us remember the name remaining things in the first 4 years of sadhana, and this is one of them. Now, some other people will think in some other way. That is, marry him, he will take care for the wife and he will forget spirituality. Chapter 9. Marriage and return to Dakshineshwar. That means, went to Kamarpukur, married and came back to Dakshineshwar. So, that he went to Kamarpukur is mentioned somewhere, so that is not repeated here. Went to Kamarpukur and married and came back. So when they, that has been mentioned. When they said you marry, he married. So he was not doing anything which people, he was for the sake of his disease or whatever people told, he was agreeing. That is not the symptom of a madman. But this teaching and samadhi he could not avoid because he had not paid attention to his body throughout his life, and he is born for redeeming people, and so if some sincere sadhak comes, he cannot avoid it. The master at Kamarpukur. The master's mother and brother were very anxious at Kamarpukur, brother Rameshwar, on hearing the news that he had given up priestly duties. So when something objective happens, then they become worried. Scarcely had 2 years elapsed since Ramkumar's passing away, when Chandramani Devi, the master's mother, and his brother Rameshwar came to know, to their utter dismay, that he was suffering from insanity. So he has given up worship because he is suffering from insanity. That is the way the news reached there. Misfortunes never come singly. One after another, mishaps come from all sides and darken man's life completely. This is normal experience. This was exactly what happened to them. Gadadhar, whom Chandra Devi had borne in her advanced age and was naturally very dear to her, and therefore with sorrow, this was Gadadhar, whom Chandra Devi had borne in an advanced age, was naturally very dear to her. And therefore with sorrow, she made arrangements for bringing him back home. When he was with her, she noticed his indifference, absent-mindedness, and restlessness. Restlessness for God, absent-mindedness because there is nothing called absent-mindedness. Mind is irrelevantly present. So he could not put his mind in the world. It was with God. So appear people absent-mindedness. Indifference because no interest in the worldly affairs. When heard his repeated and piteous cries of mother, mother, and tried various means to remedy them. What means? Along with administering medicines, various rites propitiatory to gods and demigods were tried. That is, especially in those days, and even today in villages this is more prevalent. This was at the end of the year 1858. The master's relatives were under the impression that he was possessed by a ghost. If not madness, then possessed by a ghost. Although after his return home, the master generally lived his normal life. He became sometimes overwhelmed with spiritual feelings when his deportment and behavior became quite contrary to the normal. Okay. He is trying, he is normal normally, but when the spiritual feeling overpowers him, he is different. Again, he felt great pain on account of the burning sensation in his body. Gatrada had come due to feeling of vira. Thus, on the one hand, he displayed his usual simple and amiable behavior towards all, so that was there. His devotion to God and Mother, and his love for his friends, for his mother, it is called devotion, and love for the friends. So, all these normal things are there. And on the other, there were evident in him from time to time an extraordinary contrary manifestation of an indifference to everything, an absence of shame, aversion, and fear, normal life. And in that state, no shame, no aversion, no fear. Here, instead of hate, that word has come aversion. Lajja, Gruna, Bhai. An exuberant eagerness for attaining a vague, unknown object. They do not know that, but his object is God. And an obstinate effort to clear all obstacles from the path to his desired goal. Obstinate effort, nothing he will fall short of. Whatever required, he will do. Whatever obstructions, he will go beyond. This produced in the minds of people a strange belief that he was possessed by a ghost. Because two opposite things are happening by him. Mad people will always be mad. But if possessed by a ghost, then sometimes he becomes abnormal, sometimes he is normal. That is what the people thought because of two extremes. An exorcist invited a chanda. Okay. So, exorcist, there are people specialized in removing ghosts. When there is a ruler of the ghost, it is called chanda. So they invite him and ask him to remove all the ghosts. So, chanda namano, that means the priest or others will assemble and they will do some chanting and other thing by which that chanda, the officer of the ghost, will come. That they try. A sort of demigod. That thought had crossed the mind of the simple-hearted Chandra Devi also. That ghost is there. Now when she heard others talking in the same strain, she resolved to call an exorcist for the good of her son. The master used to say, one day an exorcist came, burnt a wick sanctified by mantras and made me smell it. He said, if it is a ghost, it will flee. But it was of no avail. Afterwards, worship and other ceremonies were performed with the help of a few famous exorcists. So one exorcist fell, famous exorcists were brought, and they did lot of ceremonials, and a chanda was invited. Chanda, a sort of demigod, the superior among the ghosts. The chanda accepted the worship and offerings, became pleased, and said to it is not in his body and anywhere, Chanda is invited, and said to the exorcist, neither has he been possessed by a ghost, nor is he suffering from any disease, because he is a demigod, so he understands, and he told. The Chanda then addressed me in the presence of all, disembodied spirit, in the presence of all, and said, "O Gadai, you want to be a sadhu? Why then do you take so much of betel nut? Don't you know that it increases lust? Indeed, I like betel nut very much and used to take it very often. However, I gave it up at the Chandra's word. This small thing has great spiritual implications, please. This is not so small thing. First, for all of us, betel nut is the habit of many. And Chanda is telling betel nut increases lust. So this we should remember. First point. Secondly, Thakur had the habit of taking so much betel nut, but he was never affected by lust. That is the second important point we learn from here. And when the Chanda said, Thakur gave it up, that is the third important point. He is not proud. Oh, I will not be affected. That overconfidence is not there. Three important things we learn here. First is that betel nut increases lust. Secondly, Thakur was taking it a lot of it, but was not affected by lust. Thirdly, hearing that betel nut increases lust, he gave it up from that day. So, three important things are there in this small episode which Chanda told Thakur. The opinion of the master's relatives, what led to his normality. So what is the opinion? Then the master was about to complete his 23rd year. To a great extent, he regained the normal state of his health during stay at Kamarpukur, because the things had become natural to him. He was not so much hankering because he had attained that. And new things are strange, but he had all assimilated that. So normal. There must have been some particular reason for his regaining his normal health and the ceasing of his piteous cry. That he could now be at peace was surely due to the repeated visions of the Divine Mother. That's what Saradananda Swamiji understands. People would not understand. We are firmly convinced of it from what we have heard about his state at that time from his relatives. We shall now narrate their account. So, what they observed. All alone, he spent a good part of his time in the two fearful solitary crematoriums named Bhutir Khal and Budoi Moral in the western and northeastern borders at Kamarpukur, respectively. So Kamarpukur has two smashanas. One is at the western and northeastern borders, and the names are Bhutir Khal and Budui Modal. Now his relatives came to know of the, so this is one thing, that is to go there, spend time alone. Now his relatives came to know of the occasional manifestation of extraordinary powers in him that he had never sought, but that had grown in him because the level of consciousness had changed. He never tried for any power, but the level of consciousness is higher, it has many powers. The master, we are told, went out from home with a new pot full of sweets and other eatables in order to offer them to the jackals and the demigods that lived there. Smashan is the place for and Kali the mother's associates are ghosts and jackals. And Thakur knew them, and for him they were all concretely present there. When those eatables were offered as oblation to them, the pot, the master told them, would go up in the air and vanish into the void. So they took up that pot itself. And he could sometimes see those demigods with his own eyes. So sometimes see, sometimes not see, but the effect is that the pot itself they are taking away. When the second brother Rameshwar found that he did not return home even after midnight, he would go towards those places and loudly call his brother by name. The master would hear him and reply in a loud voice, "Yes, brother, I am coming. Don't proceed any further this side. The demigods might harm you, but they will not harm him, because he is God himself." Why the demigods harm? Because they are free in the night and somebody should not disturb them at that point. Thakur is not disturbing them. During this period, the master saw how many things of different types, but nothing of the lunacy or ghost type. During this period, the master planted a seedling of a bilva tree with his own hand in the Bhutir Khal crematorium. He used to sit under the old peepal tree that was there and meditate and perform japa for long periods of time. From what the relatives of the master told us, Saradananda Swami, it appears that the painful want that he had been experiencing, the want of the vision of the Divine Mother, was now removed by some extraordinary spiritual visions and experiences. All experiences are not visions because they are of the type of hearing, touching, smelling, and level of consciousness rise, and some of them fall under the category of visions because supernatural things seen by the eyes. When we study this period of his life, it's so because of that constancy, his restlessness had gone. And that crying mother, mother has gone. When we study this period of his life, it seems to us that he was now having constant visions of the Divine Mother's form. The Mother extremely gracious to the sadhakas, consisting of pure consciousness, that is Mother being described, holding in two of her hands a sword and a severed head, and 4 hands she has. In 2 hands, a sword and a severed head. She has cut away that Asura's head. And she is dancing with that. And stretching out the other 2 hands in gestures of offering boons and absolute fearlessness. He was now molding his life according to her direction. So, constant experience, direction, so that restlessness and that shouting, crying had gone. He was now molding his life according to her directions received in response to his questions. So she is a direct presence for him. He had, it seemed, the firm conviction since then that he would soon have the unique fortune of having the Divine Mother's eternal beatific vision. So, almost constantly, it will become completely with him. From that happening, he could understand this will happen. An instance of the Master's yogic power. Now, what powers? We should understand that. We have heard not only of the Masters being engaged in such rites and ceremonies as feeding jackals and demigods, but also of his practicing yoga, as a result of which he developed prophetic powers. Oh, this prophetic powers is about telling where his wife is. That is the power. And he said, because you are practicing yoga, the powers had come. Not happening. बाधा मात्र शून्य निरंतर दर्शन तार वाक्य चिरे उपस्थित होई. Okay, then भविष्यत दर्शन रूप विभूतिर प्रकाश होई काले ठाकुर जीवने दिखते पावा जाए. So, how this thing transforms? I wonder, Thakur practiced yoga and got powers. I just now told you he never cared for powers and he did not practice yoga as such at that time, but he got constant vision of the mother and automatically because of the rise of consciousness that powers have come. So this line is useless. You must remove this line. But also that he developed prophetic powers. There is nothing called this. ठाकुर जीवने देखते पावा जाए. What is it? Hriday is not mentioned. Oh, Hriday has come. Hriday and many people of Kamar, Pukur and Jarambati attested to it, and we heard the same from the master himself. So, with this yoga, please remove. Because Vibhuti is mentioned, does not mean that yoga Vibhuti. Oh. Something has thrown the editor's mind out of gear. We have heard not only of the, here we have heard is unnecessary. Where is this? Jackals and all that? The description of the last para has been repeated here. Why? Bhavishyat darshan रूप विभूतिर prakash O. That means also. Also they repeated that thing. ठाकुर जीवने देखते पावा जाए. We, you may say we are able to see. We means people in general. We were able to see at this time power. One power only is being described. There are no powers. Yoga Vibhutir Katha, yogic powers. Okay? Bhavishyat Darshan. Okay, we can translate as prophetic powers. So, at this time we see also prophetic powers manifested in Thakur. Simple one line. Huh? We have heard not only all that practicing yoga because of which he developed rubbish. Not because of practice of yoga. Because the level rises of the consciousness. This editor is a mad person. He has spoiled, murdered translation at various places. This is not in the first edition, I am sure about it. I read the old editions. But this editor of this edition is at fault. Was observed only, we can say, the rise of powers like prophetic vision were also observed in him at this time. That one sentence. Rise of powers like prophetic vision were also observed in him at this time. Hrida and many people of Kamarpukur and Jarambati attested to it, and we heard the same from the master himself. Okay. On finding him normal, the masters, so that connection will come next part. On finding him normal, the master's relatives decided to get him married, so that he should not lapse again in that. By now, the master's mother and other members of the household had learned that by the grace of providence, the disease which he was suffering from had abated to a great extent. For they noticed that he did not now cry piteously as before, and took food at the proper time, and that all his other actions and behavior were just like those of ordinary persons. But the fact that he used to go very often into the burning grounds and sit for worship and meditation, putting off his cloth without any sense of shame, and that he would get annoyed at the interference with his prayer and meditation and spend most of his time with gods and goddesses to the utter disregard of other words, all these were to be regarded as his natural inclination from his childhood and not to something unusual due to insanity. So this is always is going, so he is doing again. Okay. Still they saw with great apprehension that the master was completely indifferent to worldly affairs and that their apprehension, because where it will lead to, and that there was an uninterrupted inwardness about his personality. The fear that there was a great possibility of a relapse as long as he did not pay attention to the daily worldly concern in a natural way and did not give up his indifference arose in their minds over and over again and threw them even now into a gulf of anxiety. The master's affectionate mother and elder brother were now very often busy in inventing various means of saving him from a relapse into that state. At last, after a good deal of thinking and consultation, the mother and the son, that brother, decided to get the master married, and therefore an urgency was felt for finding a suitable bride. For they thought that the master's mind would not roam about in higher spiritual regions if he began to love a good-natured wife coming of a noble family. So, sir, although he was now in the prime of his youth, he was dependent in all respects on his mother and brother and was the same guileless boy as ever. So the worldly sense he had not grown. The slightest effort or endeavor for improving his own worldly affairs was not perceptible in him. How could it be forthcoming unless the responsibility of maintaining his wife and children rested on his shoulders? So here also children are mentioned. The bride had to be brought into the bridegroom's family only after paying a marriage portion according to the custom of that part of the country. Opposite of dowry. Huh? Had they the means to pay so much money as the marriage portion of a girl of 10 or 11 would require, they hesitated and had not married of Gadadhar till then, only because money could not be gathered on account of various mishaps in the family. So this outside consideration, the girl would be married when she is 10 or 11 in those days. But to such a developed girl, the marriage fees, you may say, would be higher. Had he been married long before to a girl of 5, she would have grown up by this time to attract her husband's mind and could have taken upon herself much of the management of the family. So that were their thoughts. In any case, what was destined to happen had happened. There should be no more delay. So they sought for a bride all around. The reason why the master consented to marry and the master selected his bride. These are the two paragraphs we shall read next turn in continuation of this. Om Sarvadharmasthapakasam Sarvadharmaswarupakah Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Jaya